The gun trembled in Maya Chen's hands as she stared at the man who had destroyed her life. Rain hammered against the floor-to-ceiling windows of the abandoned warehouse, each drop like a bullet against glass. The storm had rolled in from the Pacific, turning San Francisco's skyline into a blur of neon and shadow. Inside, the air hung thick with the smell of rust and old machinery, decades of industrial decay clinging to every surface. "You don't want to do this," Detective James Crawford said, his voice steady despite the Glock 19 aimed at his chest. Water dripped from his dark hair, pooling on the concrete floor between them. His gray eyes never left hers, reading the pain, written in every line of her face. Maya's finger hovered over the trigger. 3 years she had waited for this moment. 3 years since the night her sister died in that alley, since the case went cold, since justice became a word that tasted like ash in her mouth. "My sister's blood is on your hands," she whispered, her voice cracking. Elena was 19 years old. She had a future. James took a step closer, ignoring the weapon trained on him. His left hand moved slowly to his jacket pocket, and Maya tensed. "I know," he said quietly. "I know because I've been carrying that weight every single day since." The confession hit her like a physical blow. She had expected denial lies, the same bureaucratic deflection she'd received from every cop who'd worked Elena's case. What she hadn't expected was the raw guilt in his voice, the way his shoulders seemed to buckle under an invisible burden. "You killed her." The words came out strangled, barely human. James pulled a photograph from his pocket with careful, deliberate movements. "But I failed her. I've been trying to make it right ever since." Maya's vision blurred with tears she refused to let fall. The warehouse around them felt like a tomb, shadows dancing in the weak light filtering through broken windows. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed, but it might as well have been in another world. "Look at the photo," James said, extending it toward her. She wanted to pull the trigger, wanted to end the man who represented everything wrong with a system that had failed Elena, but something in his eyes stopped her. Something that looked almost like her own reflection. "Look at it, Maya." Name on his lips sent a shock through her system. She hadn't told him who she was. In the 3 months she'd been tracking him, learning his routines, planning this confrontation. She'd been careful to stay invisible. "How do you know my name?" James's smile was bitter, self-loathing. "'Cause I know everything about Elena. Chun's family. I know you dropped out of Stanford to take care of your sick mother. I know you worked 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. I know you blame yourself for not being there that night." The truth of his words felt like acid in her veins. Maya's grip on the gun wavered. "I also know," James continued, taking another step forward, "that you're not a killer. You're someone who loved her sister enough to spend 3 years hunting down the truth." The photograph lay on the concrete between them now, face down. Maya could see the white backing, but not the image that had made James's face go ashen when he'd pulled it from his pocket. "What's in the picture?" "The real reason Elena died." Thunder crashed overhead, so close it rattled the warehouse's metal frame. In that moment of sound and fury, Maya saw something shift in James's expression. A decision being made, a line being crossed. "There's something else you need to know about that night," he said, his voice barely audible over the storm. "Elena wasn't the target." The words hit her like ice water. Maya's world tilted on its axis as she processed what he'd just said. If Elena wasn't the target, then who was? And why had her sister died instead? "You were," James whispered, in the warehouse. Fell silent, except for the sound of Maya's gun clattering to the concrete floor. Maya's legs gave out, and she crumpled to the cold concrete. The warehouse spun around her, reality fracturing like glass under pressure. "That's impossible," she breathed. But even as the words left her lips, fragments of that night began rearranging themselves in her mind. Elena wearing Maya's jacket. Elena taking Maya's usual route home from the coffee shop where they both worked. Elena dying in the alley where Maya always cut through to save time. James moved carefully, kicking the gun away before kneeling beside her. Up close she could see the network of scars along his jaw, old and silvered. His eyes held a depth of pain that matched her own. "Elena switched shifts with you that night," he said softly. "Do you remember why?" Maya's throat constricted. I had a migraine. She said she'd cover the closing shift, that I should go home and rest. The memory felt poisoned now, tainted with implications she'd never considered. But how could you possibly know that? James reached for the photograph, turning it face up. Maya's breath caught. It was a surveillance photo, grainy, but clear enough to show two figures in an alley. One lying motionless on the ground, the other standing over the body. The standing figure's face was partially obscured, but Maya could make out enough features to know it wasn't a stranger. It was her mother's face staring back at her. No. The word came out as a sob. My mother has dementia. She can barely remember my name most days. She didn't 3 years ago. James's voice was gentle, but relentless. Your mother, Dr. Linda Chen, was a biochemist for Meridian Pharmaceuticals. She discovered something she wasn't supposed to discover. The warehouse seemed to close in around them. Maya's mother, who now spent her days in a memory care facility, lost in a fog of confused thoughts and fragmented recollections. The same woman who had once been brilliant enough to earn a doctorate, to work for one of the largest pharmaceutical companies on the West Coast. What did she find? James hesitated, and in that pause Maya heard the weight of secrets too heavy for one person to carry. Clinical trial data that should have been destroyed. Evidence that Meridian knowingly released a drug that caused severe neurological damage. Your mother was going to expose them. The pieces clicked together with horrible clarity. Her mother's sudden onset dementia, starting just months after Elena's death. The aggressive progression of a disease that typically developed slowly over years. The way the doctors had seemed baffled by how quickly Linda Chen's brilliant mind had deteriorated, they poisoned her. Maya's voice was barely a whisper. The night Elena died, your mother was supposed to meet with a federal investigator. Someone leaked the meeting to Meridian's security team. They sent someone to make sure she never made it. Maya pressed her palms against her eyes, trying to block out images that were too terrible to process. So they killed Elena by mistake. And then they made sure your mother couldn't testify by destroying her mind chemically, made it look like early-onset Alzheimer's. The rain had softened to a steady rhythm. But inside Maya's chest, a hurricane was building. 3 years of grief, of blaming herself for not being there, of thinking Elena's death was just another random act of violence in a city that had too many of them. All of it built on a lie. You're a cop, she said, looking up at James with new understanding. Why didn't you arrest them? The question hit him like a physical blow. James stood, turning away from her to stare out at the storm-lashed city. Because I'm not just any cop. I'm the one who gave them the information about your mother's meeting. The confession landed in the space between them like a grenade. Maya felt the last of her assumptions crumble. She scrambled to her feet, backing away from him. You're the reason Elena's dead? James faced her, and she could see the self-loathing etched into every line of his face. My daughter was dying leukemia. Meridian promised me access to an experimental treatment if I fed them intelligence on certain cases. I never thought anyone would get killed. Maya wanted to scream, to hit him, to pick up the gun and finish what she'd started, but something in his expression stopped her. The way he looked at her wasn't with fear or calculation. It was with the desperate hope of a man seeking absolution from the one person who could never give it to him. Your daughter? She managed? Sarah. She would have been 8 next month. The past tense hit Maya like a second blow. Would have been? James's composure finally cracked. The treatment didn't work. She died 6 months after Elena. 6 months. After I destroyed everything decent about myself for nothing. The warehouse fell silent except for the sound of water dripping and 2 people breathing in the wreckage of their shattered lives. There's more, James said finally. The man who killed Elena, the one Meridian hired, he's still out there. Yesterday he started asking questions about you. The safe house smelled like stale cigarettes and broken dreams. Maya sat at a scarred wooden table watching James pace the length of the cramped apartment like a caged animal. 3 days had passed since the warehouse, 3 days of hiding in this forgotten corner of Oakland while James worked his contacts, and Maya tried to reconcile the man who had betrayed her. Family with the one now risking everything to protect her. His name is Vincent Kozlov, James said, sliding a file across the table. Former Spetsnaz, now freelance. Meridian has used him for 6 years to clean up their messes. Maya opened the file with trembling fingers. The photograph inside showed a man in his 40s with pale eyes and surgical scars along his throat. Everything about him radiated cold efficiency. He's been asking about your daily routines, the coffee shop where you work, the route you take to visit your mother, even your apartment building's security system. James stopped pacing, his gray eyes meeting hers across the table. Maya, he's not just gathering intelligence. He's planning something. She studied the file, memorizing every detail of the face that haunted her nightmares. Why now? It's been 3 years. Because Meridian's about to go public. They need to tie up loose ends before the IPO. James sat down across from her, close enough that she could see the exhaustion etched into his features. Your mother's medical records still exist? If the right person connected her sudden dementia to her work at Meridian, it could unravel everything. Maya's phone buzzed. A text from Riverside Memory Care, the facility where her mother lived. She read it twice before the words sank in. They want to see me, she said, her voice hollow. Something about my mother's condition. Leames leaned forward. What do they want? She's been asking for Alina. They think seeing me might help with her agitation. Maya looked up from her phone, and James saw the devastation in her dark eyes. She doesn't remember that Alina is dead. Every day she asks when Alina is coming. To visit, the cruelty of it hit James like a fist to the chest. Not only had they killed Alina and poisoned Linda Chin's mind, but they'd left her trapped in a hell where she would spend eternity waiting for a daughter who would never come home. We can't go, he said. It's too dangerous. She's my mother. Maya's voice carried a steel that hadn't been there 3 days ago. I'm not letting her die alone and confused because I'm afraid. Maya, listen to me. James reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. Contact sent electricity through both of them, a dangerous intimacy born from shared trauma. If Kozlov is watching, he'll use her to get to you. Then we'll be ready for him. The drive to Riverside took them through neighborhoods that bled into each other like watercolors in rain. James had armed himself with a service weapon and backup piece while Maya carried pepper spray and a knife she prayed she'd never have to use. The facility sat on a hill, overlooking the bay, its manicured grounds a sharp contrast to the violence that had brought them here. Maya's mother looked smaller than Maya remembered, lost in a wheelchair by the window of the common room. Linda. Chen had once commanded lecture halls and research labs. But now she stared at the birds in the courtyard with the wondering eyes of a child. Mom, Maya knelt beside the wheelchair, taking her mother's fragile hand. Linda turned, and for a moment, recognition flickered in her eyes. Maya, is that you, sweetheart? Yes, Mom, I'm here. Where's Alina? She was supposed to visit today, or was that yesterday? Linda's brow furrowed with the confusion that had become her constant companion. I get so mixed up sometimes. Maya felt tears she'd been holding back for 3 years finally break free. Alina can't come, Mom. She's not able to visit anymore. But she promised. Linda's voice turned petulant, childlike. She promised she'd help me remember things. James watched from across the room, positioned where he could see all the entrances. Something felt wrong. The facility was too quiet, too empty for a Tuesday afternoon. Where was the usual bustle of staff and visiting families? His phone vibrated. A text from an unknown number. If you want our mother to live, come alone to the parking garage, level B2. You have 5 minutes. James looked up to see Maya still kneeling by her mother's chair, both women lost in a conversation about a daughter who would never come home. He had a choice to make. Walk away and let Kozlov finish what he'd started 3 years ago, or face the man whose bullets had been meant for Maya, but had found Alina instead. It wasn't really a choice at all. James slipped out of the common room without a word, taking the elevator down to the garage's bowels. The fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting everything in sick, greenish shadows. His footsteps echoed off concrete walls as he made his way between rows of parked cars. Detective Crawford. The voice came from behind a pillar. Kozlov stepped into the light, and James saw that the photographs hadn't captured the true coldness of the man. He moved like death itself, silent and inevitable. Vincent Kozlov, you have caused me considerable inconvenience. Kozlov's English was precise, accented but clear. I prefer to work without complications. James kept his hand near his weapon. Killing innocent people tends to complicate things. The girl was not supposed to be there, but dead is dead. Yes. Kozlov smiled, and it was the most chilling expression James had ever seen. Now I must clean up this mess you have made by protecting the Chen woman. She doesn't know anything that could hurt Meridian, perhaps, but her existence is a reminder. Of what happened, Meridian does not like reminders. Kozlov began to circle him, predators sizing up prey. They also do not like loose ends. You are a loose end detective. You know too much? Feel too much guilt? The realization hit James like ice water. He hadn't just been protecting Maya from Kozlov, he'd been walking into his own execution. The deal was that I'd bring Maya to you in exchange for letting her live. Kozlov's laugh was soft, deadly. There was no deal. You received text from my phone? Yes? Simple trick? James reached for his gun, but Kozlov was faster. The suppressed pistol appeared in his hand like magic, its barrel trained on James's chest. Your guilt makes you sloppy, Kozlov said. Caring about the Chen family was your mistake. Now it will be your death. The elevator dinged behind them. Both men turned as the doors opened, revealing Maya with a gun in her hands and murder in her eyes. Step away from him. Maya's voice echoed off the concrete walls of the parking garage, steady despite the tremor in her hands. She held James's backup weapon, the one he'd hidden in the car's glove compartment, trained on Vincent Kozlov's center. Mass. Kozlov's pale eyes flicked between Maya and James, calculating angles and possibilities. His own gun never wavered from James's chest. Miss Chen, he said with that terrible smile, you should not be here. Funny thing about should, Maya replied, moving closer. My sister should be alive. My mother should remember her own daughter's name. A lot of things should be different. James felt the world narrow to this moment, this choice between two kinds of death. He could see the rage burning in Maya's eyes, 3 years of grief and guilt finally finding a target. But he could also see something else, something that terrified him more than Kozlov's gun. Love, somehow impossibly. This broken woman had begun to care about the man who had destroyed her family. Maya, get out of here, James said quietly. This isn't your fight, like hell it isn't. Her finger tightened on the trigger. He killed Alina. Kozlov tilted his head, studying her with professional interest. You think you can shoot me, little girl? You think you have killer's heart? Try me. But even as Maya spoke, James saw the subtle shift in Kozlov's stance, the minute adjustment of his grip. The killer was preparing to move, to spin, and fire in one fluid motion that would drop Maya before she could pull the trigger. Time slowed. James saw Kozlov's muscles tense, saw the decision crystallize in those cold eyes. In that suspended moment, James made his own choice. He threw himself sideways, slamming into Kozlov just as the assassin began to turn toward Maya. Both men crashed into the concrete pillar. Kozlov's shot going wide. Maya's gun barked once, twice, the sound deafening in the enclosed space. James felt the burn of a bullet across his ribs as he grappled with Kozlov. The killer was stronger, faster, trained in ways James could never match. But James fought with something Kozlov didn't have, desperation born from the need to protect the one person who might forgive him. They rolled across the oil-stained concrete, both reaching for Kozlov's dropped weapon. James's fingers closed around the grip just as Kozlov's boot caught him in the solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs. James. Through the haze of pain, James saw Maya running toward them, her gun raised but unable to get a clear shot. Kozlov was on top of him now, hands closing around James's throat with crushing force. You should have stayed away, Kozlov hissed. Now you both die. James felt his vision starting to gray at the edges. With his last conscious thought, he pressed the assassin's gun into Kozlov's side and pulled the trigger. The shot was muffled by flesh and clothing, but Kozlov's grip loosened with a grunt of surprise. James rolled away, gasping, as blood began to pool beneath the killer's body. Kozlov looked up at Maya with those pale, dying eyes. "This changes nothing," he whispered. "There are others. There are always others." And Vincent Kozlov, who had killed Elena Chen in a case of mistaken identity, was dead. Maya knelt beside James, her hands shaking as she checked his wounds. The bullet had scored a line across his ribs, painful but not fatal. "We need to get you to a hospital," she said. "No." James struggled to sit up. "I need to finish this." Maya helped him to his feet, and for a moment they stood together in the aftermath of violence, two damaged people bound by shared trauma and something deeper. "There's something I haven't told you," James said, his voice rough from Kozlov's grip on his throat. Maya's heart clenched. After everything they'd been through, there were still secrets between them. "I have a contact at the FBI, Agent Sarah Morrison. She's been building a case against Meridian for 2 years, but she needs evidence. Physical proof of what they did to your mother." "What kind of proof?" James reached into his jacket, wincing at the movement, and pulled out a small digital recorder. Everything Kozlov just said, his confession about Elena's death, about Meridian's involvement, about there being others. Maya stared at the device. "How long have you been recording?" "Since the warehouse." Every conversation, every admission, James met her eyes. "Going to use it to bring them down, to make sure Elena's death meant something." The betrayal hit her like a physical blow. "You've been using me. All of this, the protection, the shared trauma, even this moment right now. You've been gathering evidence, Maya?" "No. It started that way, but what?" Her voice cracked. "But you decided to throw in some real feelings to make it more convincing." James reached for her, but she stepped back. "You about my daughter, about the guilt I carry, that was real. My feelings for you, those are real too." "Your feelings for me?" Maya laughed bitterly. "You don't even know me. You know Elena's sister, the grieving woman whose pain you could manipulate to get what you needed. That's not true, isn't it?" Maya's eyes blazed with hurt and fury. "Yeah, recorded me in my most vulnerable moments. God, you recorded me talking about my mother, about Elena, about the nightmares that wake me up screaming. All of it evidence for your case." James felt something inside him breaking. "I was trying to get justice for Elena, for your mother. For my daughter who died because I trusted the wrong people. By violating what little trust I had left to give." The words hung between them like a chasm too wide to cross. Maya turned away, but James caught her arm. "Don't walk away from this," he said desperately. "We can still bring them down. The recording proves everything." Maya looked at him for a long moment, and James saw the exact instant when whatever fragile connection they'd built shattered completely. She pulled the recorder from his grip and smashed it against the concrete pillar. "Some things are more important than justice," she said quietly, watching the plastic fragments scatter across the floor. "Like knowing that at least one person in this goddamn world wasn't using your pain to get what they wanted." Maya walked toward the elevator, leaving James bleeding and broken beside Kozlov's body. As the elevator doors closed between them, James realized he had won the war against Meridian, but lost the only battle that truly mattered. The battle for Maya Chen's heart. 6 months later, Maya Chen stood in the rain outside Riverside Memory Care, watching through the window as her mother fed birds that existed only in her fractured mind. The trial had ended 3 weeks ago. Meridian Pharmaceuticals had been destroyed. Its executives facing decades in federal prison, its stock worthless, its victims finally vindicated. None of it had brought Elena back. Maya's breath fogged the window as she pressed her palm against the glass. Inside, her mother smiled at invisible companions, free from the weight of memory, but also freed from the joy of it. The experimental treatment had failed. Dr. Linda Chen would spend her remaining years lost in a maze of her own mind. Maya would visit her every day, pretending her mother remembered who she was. "She looks peaceful." Maya didn't turn around. She'd known James would come eventually. His footsteps on wet concrete had become as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. The prosecution wants to thank you, he said, stopping a few feet behind. The backup recording from my phone was enough to convict them all. I didn't do it for them. I know. They stood in silence to people who had saved each other's lives and destroyed each other's hearts. The rain fell steadily, washing away the city's sins, but never its scars. I've been reassigned, James said finally. Internal affairs cleared me, but staying in San Francisco felt wrong. Too many ghosts. Maya finally turned to face him. The months had changed them both. James looked older, worn down by testimony, and trials and the weight of redemption that never quite balanced the scales. Maya looked stronger somehow, as if grief had finally stopped breaking her and started forging her into something new. Where will you go, Portland? Oh, they need someone to head up their cold case division. James managed a bitter smile. Apparently. I have experience with unsolved murders. Maya nodded. She'd known this day would come, had prepared herself for the inevitable goodbye. What she hadn't prepared for was how much it would hurt. There's something else, James said, reaching into his jacket. For a moment, Maya's hand moved instinctively toward the pepper spray she still carried, and they both registered the movement with shared understanding of how trauma never really leaves. Instead of a weapon, James pulled out an envelope, thick and official-looking. Ridian's Victim Compensation Fund, he explained. It's not enough to give you back what they took, but it's enough to get your mother the best care money can buy. Experimental treatments, private nurses, a facility that specializes in dementia research. Maya stared at the envelope. Can't take that. Why not? Because it feels like blood money. James stepped closer. Close enough that she could see. The silver threading through his dark hair, the new lines around his eyes. Lena would have wanted you to take care of your mother. The words hit their mark. Maya's composure cracked, and she felt tears she'd thought she'd cried out months ago begin to fall. I dream about her sometimes, Maya whispered. Alina, she's wearing my jacket, walking down that alley, but in the dream, she knows what's coming. She looks back at me and says, "It was supposed to be you, wasn't it?" And I wake up wishing it had been. James reached out without thinking, his thumb brushing away her tears. Maya didn't pull away, and for a moment they were back in the warehouse. Where this all began, two broken people finding each other in the darkness. Survivor's guilt is a hell of a thing, James said softly. But Alina didn't die so you could spend your life wishing you had died instead. She died because bad people made bad choices, and nothing you did or didn't do could have changed that. Maya closed her eyes, leaning into his touch, despite everything that had passed between them. You recorded me saying that. That first night in the safe house, when I told you about the dreams. I deleted that part before I turned the evidence over. She opened her eyes, searching his face. Why? Because some things are sacred. Pain like that, it belongs to the person feeling it, not to a courtroom full of strangers. Maya took the envelope from his other hand, their fingers brushing in the exchange. Thank you, Maya. James's voice was rough with everything he couldn't say. What happened between us, the way I betrayed your trust, I'll never forgive myself for that. But I need you to know that every moment we shared, every conversation, every time you let me see who you really are beneath all that grief, those were the most honest moments of my life. I know, she said simply. I know because I felt them too. They stood facing each other in the rain, to people who had found love in the wreckage of tragedy and lost it to the very justice they'd both craved. It was a love built on shared trauma, tested by betrayal, and tempered by the knowledge that some wounds never fully heal. Will I see you again? James asked. Maya looked back through the window at her mother, then at the man who had saved her life and broken her heart in equal measure. In another life, maybe. One where we meet in a coffee shop or at a bookstore, where we get to fall in love without all this damage between us. In another life, James agreed. He turned to go, then stopped. Maya, for what it's worth, I think Alina would be proud of who you've become. You're stronger than you know. Maya watched him walk away until the rain and distance swallowed him. Completely. Then she went inside to sit with her mother, to hold her hand while Linda Chen spoke to daughters who lived only in memory. To begin the long work of healing that would take the rest of her life. Outside, the storm passed, leaving San Francisco washed clean and gleaming. But inside room 237 of Riverside Memory Care, two women sat together in the aftermath of love and loss, learning that sometimes the most profound form of justice is simply choosing to keep living when everything inside you wants to stop. Maya squeezed her mother's hand and began to tell her stories about Alina, knowing that tomorrow her mother would forget them and she would have to tell them again. It was the least she could do for the sister who had died wearing her jacket. Walking her path, taking the bullet meant for her. It was the most she could do for the love she'd found and lost with a man who carried too many secrets and too much guilt to ever be whole. It was enough. Like this video if the story touched your heart. Subscribe for more emotional tales and share with someone who believes in the power of true love. Let us know in the comments. Love connecting with our global community of romance lovers. The end.